the final hour of Inside the Gamecocks, the show. Welcome back. It is Thursday, and it is Halloween. Happy Halloween. Built by the Barn Dough Co. and presented by our friends at Resto Pros. Resto Pros, there when you need them. David Nuno is here from TexAgs.com. But, Mike, we've got, after this guest, we also have the Fab Five.
We do. We have the Salsaritas Gamecock Traditions Fab 5, brought to you in part by Cut.com. For those of you that want to make a nice personal wager with your friends, your family, maybe another listener, go to Cut.com. Mention promo code Gamecocks, get 10% off. Also by State Farm agent Gary Patterson, also a referee. He'll be working a game somewhere. You'll probably stumble upon him if you're doing some remote surfing. Taking care of everybody in the Midlands, from Lugolf to Columbia to Camden to Blythewood. GaryPatterson.net. Just one easy call. You can switch and save and get into a better plan and have a better person on your side. That's Gary Patterson of State Farm Insurance.
David Nuno joins us, TexAgs.com, Director of Broadcasting. Thank you for dressing as something normal. Phil's supposed to be a conehead. Clearly, he looks like something different. And JC looks like the Tiger King's Tiger Queen. So we apologize for that. But happy Halloween, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. And I'll be very honest with you. I would probably wear this on a Thursday anyway. It just happens to be Halloween, so the Batman theme kind of works. But I appreciate you guys having me on.
That's right.
Yeah.
Batman needs no day. It's okay.
No, that's right. Yes, every day. That's right, man. Well, look, we only have
guys,
one.
I got to apologize, by the way. Time zones get me, even though I do the math and people tell me 1 o'clock Eastern. Okay, in my head, even though I wrote down Eastern, I'm thinking 1 o'clock Central like a big idiot. So I apologize for getting it confused.
No worries. No worries. Yeah.
We deal with that all
it gets
the
me
time.
too. And sometimes I forget where the lines are. And so when I'm talking to people or trying to book them for the show, I'm just like, yeah, 1 o'clock. I'm like, wait. I need to be specific here.
When you travel a lot around the SEC, as I do, that is the number one thing that will trip you up, because you got about half the teams now in the Central and the other half in the East, and you see all these times, meetings, conference calls, appointments, and like, wait a minute, what is that, Central? Is that Eastern? Like, that's just routine. That's just what you do. And you never get it right. You just hope to bat like 500. That's the best you can hope for.
Yeah. Live from courtside in Tuscaloosa, where Damian Fishback will be the play-by-play guy tonight, because Mike thought the game was at 7 o'clock.
There's no one here. Why is nobody here? Did they not get the memo?
David, man, we really are glad to have you. Thank you so much. This is an exciting football game. A&M, I think we were talking about them earlier, and I love the term very difficult to beat, because they don't beat themselves. But we didn't come on to talk about that. Everybody just wants to know who the quarterback's going to be. You should know that by now. No, but I think you look back at that record, right? The not a lot of mistakes by this team. What has Mike Elko done in his short tenure to get all that cleaned up?
You know, the beauty is you hear all these opening day press conferences and you think, all right, this coach speaks my language. And they always speak our language, right? No matter who it is. Like Jimbo Fisher spoke my language day one. All these guys speak your language. But then to hear it and then see it actually play out the way he described it. He always talks about the 6 inches in front of your face, like each day matters. That sounds like a lot of coach speak. It's when you're able to get your team to buy into it. And I think that has been the case. This A&M team the last few years, guys, people talk about the Jimbo Fisher era as this horrible era. They were robbed of a playoff chance, in my opinion, in 2020. And I'm curious what that could have done for the culture. Maybe nothing, because it's not like they were lacking for talent. But after that year, the 8-4 year, the 5-7 year, the 7-5 year, you look at those teams, it's not like teams were blowing out A&M, right? These were games that came down to a possession or two, and that's life in the SEC for all the teams that are in it. But A&M was like, they were leading Alabama last year, and they, in the fourth quarter, and they gave that game away. And when I say gave that game away, it sometimes rings hollow, because LSU fans think they gave that game away to A&M, and I think A&M took that game from LSU. So what I'm saying is, this coach not only is about that life, but you see the difference in the fourth quarter because that's where A&M has been able to beat teams. They have controlled the line of scrimmage in every game in the fourth quarter minus the Notre Dame game. And that was, to me, a horrible game to start off with. In the beginning, I was like, oh, this is a great game to start off with. But with a new coach and a new era with half your roster different, to go against a team that did have experience and a great defensive line, maybe the best or second best defensive line A&M is going to face all year, that was a hard way to start. But to answer your question in a 30-minute version, I should have kept it to 30 seconds. Coach Elko, everything he preached, they have done. And the coach speak works with this group of guys. They've bought into it. And that starts with Coach Elko, all the assistants, and especially their strength and conditioning coach, Tommy Moffitt.
Yeah, I'm going to steal something from JC that he said the other day when he was a normal human being. He said, for the longest time, the A&M was missing a ball coach. A ball coach. Get rid of the glitz and the glamour and all this highfalutin junk. We just need a ball coach around here. And you're talking about, Mike, I think you've mentioned this numerous times over the years that we've been doing it. That's a scary program to get going because I don't know that they'd really be able to slow down. There's so much money, obviously, as you know, so much talent. And it's like there's always just something missing from going from like a really solid, good football program to an elite football program. But now they've got a ball coach, and that seems like it could be making a difference maybe a lot sooner than a lot of us initially thought.
I thought this team was going to be pretty good this year, but I was teetering, and this could still happen, by the way. There's still a lot of football to be played, but I thought they were more like an 8-4, 9-3 level of team.
Yeah,
that's what I expected, and I've been thinking that the last couple of years. This is what this team should be, right? A&M, we think that a bad year should be 9-3, 8-4. Well, that seems to be a good year the last few years. So that's what I thought, but then you see some of the challenges that I didn't expect. I did not expect for Connor Wigman to take a huge step back. And he has taken, and I don't know if it's because of the injury. I don't know if it's because his confidence, the third offensive coordinator he's had in the last 3 years. But let's not forget the Connor Wigman that South Carolina saw 2 years ago when he made his debut, but when he came in the fourth quarter of that game where South Carolina went up 17-0, we all know how that one started, and Connor came in as a freshman and gave them a chance to win in the final couple of minutes of that game. Gave them a chance, right? He just gave them that opportunity. That's not the same Connor we've seen for the most part this year. So I didn't expect that to take such a step backward. And nobody expected Marcel Reed to come out of the woodworks the way he has. But the thing is, this team has been able to beat you a couple of different ways. They can beat you with Marcel, running that zone option read, or they can beat you on, only a couple of different times this year with Connor Wigman in the pocket throwing. And the one that all comes to mind is that Missouri game. Obviously, South Carolina is a different level of defense.
That would lead me to my question, David, and that is, for my money, this is the best defense A&M's seen since Notre Dame. I'm not even sure if it's that close. I think this defense is a different level than LSU. It's a different level than Florida. It's a different level than Missouri. So walk with us through. We were talking how we think this game unfolds, and who knows? It's always unpredictable. But if both defenses key on the ground game and kind of jam things up and stack the box, what have you, how do you think A&M's passing game responds via either Wigman or Reed?
Well, my gut is going to be Reed, the quarterback. Like, how can you go away from that? Would I be surprised if Connor starts this next game? No, I wouldn't be surprised. Here's what I worry about with Connor Wigman. That pass rush, everybody knows about it, is ridiculous, right? Mm-hmm. And if Connor is not confident in his escapability, then he's going to be. If South Carolina can get after a quarterback, they're going to get after Connor if he's not being decisive. That's where the Marcel Reed zone option read really becomes a dagger, because if you can't get passing going anyway, at least you have his legs. What I would counter with all that is A&M is probably the best running team South Carolina has faced, and the team that's their bread and butter. We're going to run the ball, and if I know that Alabama tried to run the ball, was it 36 times for 101 yards, something to that effect. Alabama's not the same caliber of running team that A&M is. So If A&M can't run the ball, then you're going to have some major problems, right? Because this offense is all about running the ball. I'd be curious to see how the interior part of the defensive line matches up with the running game. I know they stopped everybody they faced, but I'd be curious to see if a team, that's what they're going to do. And one thing about A&M running the ball, and this is by far the best defense, and maybe even better than Notre Dame. How does that defensive line work in the fourth quarter? As good as they are, and I think they're fantastic, when A&M has had success in games, it is basically winning the line of scrimmage in the fourth quarter. I'm not suggesting that this offensive line that's been really good this year, minus Chase Basantes for the second straight week, is going to dominate that kind of defensive line. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm curious what it looks like in the fourth quarter after chipping away the way they've done to LSU, the way they did to Arkansas. Again, not the same level of defensive line. This is more like Notre Dame. But I think A&M has certainly grown since that Notre Dame game.
Well, David, tell us a little about the offensive line for Texas A&M and what's been led them to so much success running the football.
Well, I'm going to be very honest with you. Two things have happened. They've always had the personnel. They had the personnel last year, but they weren't coached right. Steve Adazio was a legend on the offensive line in the coaching ranks for years, but that was a long time ago. His philosophy did not work with today's type of athlete in this new NIL portal world. He's a big yeller, and I don't think the development was there. I don't think they developed the guys. So what I think has happened is they bring in Adam Cushing, and he has done a brilliant job at development, but also getting on the same page with these guys. So that's part of it, the scheme, the approachability, the way he talks to them. And also they brought in some dudes, right? Like if you look at some of these players, right, Armaj Reed Adams, I mean, he brings a chair with him before the game starts. He's hitting the floor. You want some dudes on your offensive line, and they have that mentality. And then I'm going to go back to Tommy Moffitt, our strength and conditioning coach, or A&M strength and conditioning coach. His whole philosophy is about being at your best at the end of games, and he has made them work to that. In the first few days of training back in February with Coach Moffitt, these guys couldn't finish these sessions. They were finishing it in the spring, and that's why I think they have been at their best in the fourth quarter.
David, I think you're asking a wonderful question as to what that Gamecock front looks like after 4 quarters of, running the football, regardless, or at least after 3 quarters, regardless of how successful it was. One of the things that the Gamecocks were blessed with this year up there is depth for the first time in a long time, but it brings up a very curious question as to how they use that depth from time to time. Early in games, we'll see a series or two where you don't see a ton of Kyle Kennard or Dylan Stewart or somebody on the interior swapped out for 4 or 5 plays, and you'll see the ball move a little bit, and then they'll get those guys back in there and things will slow themselves back down in order to preserve some of that energy for the fourth quarter. But I think a lot of the answer to the question that you're asking actually has to do with the other side of the football, and it's, can Carolina's offense stay on the field and move it? And you look at the Aggies defensive line, all the credit you're giving to South Carolina, and it's deserved and certainly welcomed, but those guys are pretty good too. And Nick Scorton is really good, as we all well know. They only give up 74 yards per game against league opponents. That's number 1 in the SEC. So what do they, outside of him, tell us about the rest of those guys and our audience about the rest of those guys, what they do so well, how you can maybe penetrate that a little bit. Phil, don't get excited. How you can penetrate that a little bit. And South Carolina's rushing offense this year has certainly struggled from time to time. So they're going to have to find a way to do something there. What's the key to that success?
I think that's a great question. And what I'm going to tell you is teams have been able to run on A&M for a little bit. For instance, I think it was Mississippi State. They had 91 yards rushing in the first quarter. They didn't have anything else after that. A&M's ability to make adjustments, especially at the half, but in-game adjustments has been fantastic on the defensive side. We saw the adjustment they made offensively in the third quarter by bringing in Marcel Reed, and it changed the whole complexion. But I'm talking defensively. Where A&M struggles is big plays. I know Lenoris Sellers can throw it deep when he needs to, and that's where A&M's Achilles heel has been this year. Every game you can point at a play or two, like there was a big play, like a breakdown in the secondary, maybe a defensive lineman being a step away from getting a sack, but their adjustments have been so good. And what they do is they just shut off the running game. Jaquindon Jackson did nothing against A&M, right? He came in there as the big name. You just go down the list. LSU, the running game looked promising the last 3 weeks heading into that game. They shut that down to what do they have? 42 yards rushing against A&M, some number like that. So if you're going to have success on this defensive line, there's Shamar Stewart, there's Shamar Turner, there's DJ Hicks, there's Rodolph Johnson, and obviously Nick Scorden, and they got a cast of characters. I mean, they got 5 stars for days at that position. They got guys, they have multiple Shamars on the team that you don't know which is the better one. That's what shows you. When you have 2 Shamars that are probably going to the NFL here in a few months, that just shows you the depth and the level of defensive line that they have. But again, I think there's a couple places they're vulnerable. Linebacker has been a lot better the last 3 weeks, but early in the season, linebacking the crew, Torian York, as good as he was as a freshman, I would say that group early on in the season took a step back, but Torian's had 3 consecutive weeks of really good football. The secondary, Will Lee has been fantastic, but I don't know if that's going to be South Carolina's their strength, right? Because I think that's one of the areas of concern offensively for South Carolina. Do they have playmakers? So you're going to have to run the ball. I think Lenore Sellers is going to have to run that ball as well and not get injured because, and forgive me if I'm wrong, was it the LSU game where he had to leave for a little while where he was banged up a bit? Am I right about that?
Yeah, he came out of the game. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that kind of changed the way that game felt immediately, right? So if Lenore Sellers can get out and run, and I think that's an area that A&M is not vulnerable because they did a great job stopping Taylor Green. Michael Van Buren at Mississippi State was successful in the first half of that game against them, kind of got shut down a little bit in the second half. But I think he's going to have to be able to run on them. Even though they give up a ton of sacks, I think he is going to be the difference maker. If he has a good game, South Carolina wins.
Yeah, hey, Mike, before you ask, I just want to throw a quick number in
Go
here
ahead.
because you mentioned the big plays, and we've talked about some of that this week, and the fact that the Aggies are susceptible to some. By the way, so is the Gamecocks defense. They've been blitzed a couple of times down the field this year, but I found this number just astounding. This is really wild. The last 4 games that A&M has played have been all against SEC opponents, right? Arkansas, Missouri, Mississippi State, and LSU. I don't know if anybody realizes this, and I'm just interested as to I know that the yardage through the air because of those big plays is higher than Coach Elko and his staff would like to see it. But does anybody realize that opponents are only completing 51% of their passes in the last 4 games against them? That's pretty remarkable. So I'm not sure if that's David. I'm not sure if that's all because of the guys up front and the disruptions they call, or if the secondary is just kind of hey, hit or miss. I don't know what it is, but 51% is 51%. So you don't complete a lot of passes against these guys, but you do have to hit some big ones.
You do, and I'll say this: Will Lee has been spectacular there. The blanket. I don't know if you guys saw the couple weeks back. Who was it? It was Missouri coming into the stadium, and Luther Burden said that somebody delivered a blanket to his hotel room, and it was signed by Will Lee, and that's his nickname, the Blanket. And he showed up to Kyle Field with a blanket on him. Will Lee did not send that to him. It was something that Drink was doing to try to get his guys. At least we believe it was Drink trying to get his guys motivated. Luther Burden didn't have a good game against Will Lee. He's been spectacular. I'm going to tell you, it's the defensive line giving that secondary as a group opportunities because, like if you look at the LSU game, 2 things happened. First off, Nuss is the most spectacular quarterback, especially in that first half that I had seen this year. Every quarterback A&M has faced, Nuss was by far the best. I think Michael Van Buren was very close. But in the second half, what changed? He didn't have the time, right? He was now throwing across his body. He felt the footsteps because the defense was starting to get to them. And you talk about some of the yards. Like last week, he threw for 450, I think it was. Part of that was, 400. He threw for 250 in the first half. Part of that was these big plays. These big plays happened so much on 3rd down, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 15. They were just completing. And what A&M was doing, they weren't tackling well in the first half. And there was just a split second off in that first half. So if you can hit these plays, you're going to get some opportunities to move the ball. The question then becomes, can you get inside the red zone? Because what A&M did so well against LSU, even when LSU was dominating that game, was they were kicking 48, 49-yard field goals. And I don't care what college kicker out there, they're typically not that, especially on the road, that accurate from 45 plus on the road, especially in that hostile environment. And by the way, we have a lot of respect for what the environment is going to be there this weekend.
You talked about some of the weaknesses or inconsistencies with Wigman. Is there a game or maybe a key stretch in time this year where you say, okay, they've kind of tapped into some of Reed's limitations? Like, we all know he is a super explosive runner, but paying it forward to Saturday, I mean, what do you think Carolina's defense does to cause him to hear some of those footsteps and have some issues? Because I don't think he's going to be able to just slice and dice this Gamecock defense the way he did LSU in that second half. I just don't see that happening. So if he's out there a lot, what is it you could see as a possible pitfall for him in the A&M offense?
I'm glad you brought that up. So I said that, the better quarterback is going to win this game. That is true, and it goes with which defense capitalizes on that moment, right? So if a defense is able to turn that into points, that's the team that's going to win this game. One thing about Marcel Reed is, so far, knock on wood for A&M, he hasn't had an interception. He's been really good protecting the ball.
Yep.
I will look at the Arkansas game, because the Arkansas game is that game where I'm like, man, they need Connor Wigman. For 3 quarters, I was thinking that in my head. Man, like, they're just not moving the ball. They're just not moving the ball. And then in the fourth quarter, it was a very simple play. They were backed up, I believe, to the 2-yard line. And Marcel just did this rollout, and there was all this space because of his speed. And he found an open Noah Thomas, got the first down. They got a little space, and they got momentum going. And that's when Le'Veon Moss started just eating up that defensive line of Arkansas, right? So I think the thing with Marcel is, yeah, he's a little limited in his passing. He threw a beautiful ball last week to Noah Thomas. I mean, for 45 yards. It was incredible. Right after LSU had scored, they were trying to steal back the momentum. First play, throws it deep. Beautiful, right? He could throw a pretty ball. He's just not as he doesn't see the field. And I don't think Connor Wigman is seeing the field very good right now. But when Connor is locked in, he doesn't see the field the way Connor does. But, yeah, if you can get him early into some tough spots, he is vulnerable. And I think that Arkansas game is the game that I looked at where they were able to get to him, and he also had a hard time completing passes. He's still throwing for over 140, 150 yards a game. And there haven't been many games, just the Arkansas game, where he was not able to rush the ball well. And that's one thing that I'm curious. How does, Arkansas's defense is good, but it's not at the level of South Carolina. So which quarterback makes the least amount of mistakes to me? Because I don't expect for A&M to throw for 200 yards on this South Carolina defense. I don't know if they're going to be able to rush for 200 yards on this South Carolina defense. There's a lot of unknowns there. You just can't make mistakes. A&M, for the most part, has done a good job not making mistakes. One area last week that I found interesting, though, is they had a lot of penalties, and a lot of dumb penalties, to be honest with you. And Coach Elko even addressed it at halftime. There's a video on the Pulse that kind of is like, we can't be having those. You have those on the road, oh my goodness. That's a hole that's very hard to get out of.
David, I'll leave you with a stat really quick that I thought was really interesting, just looking at Marcel Reed. On his dropbacks and rush attempts, he's averaging a touchdown. Not a first down, but a touchdown on 7.3% of his dropbacks and rushing attempts. And he might be one of the most electric players in college football when he gets going. And it'll be interesting to see if he can complete enough passes against South Carolina if he does indeed get the start. And then my follow-up question would be, it seems like Marcel Reed, you believe, is probably going to start. It's hard to go away from him right now. But what does that do to the A&M offense team in general if South Carolina does get out to a lead and a quarterback change is made for A&M?
That's interesting. So you're saying if South Carolina, I don't know if they're going to be going back and forth. Like, I don't think that's going to be the case. So if Marcel was the starter, that would mean South Carolina would be up by significant points, right? Because I don't think they're going to take them out if it's a 7-3 game. Even if
like
struggle.
a 17-3 or 13-0 after the second quarter.
I'd have to see how the game is going because it's hard to answer. I should play the game better. I'm sorry. But to me, Coach Elko's just got this gut feeling that it's time, right? And he didn't think it was time against Notre Dame. Maybe against Notre Dame, had he gone to Marcel, or had he gone to Marcel at all, maybe they do win that game because it was a tie game with 2 minutes left. But there's not a lot more evidence now with Marcel than there was before. If Connor Wigman is throwing darts and is comfortable, like we saw against Missouri, that guy puts you in a great position to win. But I don't think against this defense you want to chance that, right? Because He just doesn't have the escapability that Marcel has, and this defense will get after you. So I don't see them doing that, but I'd have to see how the game is played. If you can't run the ball with Marcel and Le'Veon Moss and Amari Daniels, and your only hope is throwing on that secondary, I guess. I have a feeling there would be a bigger chance for a quarterback change if Connor starts than if Marcel starts.
So to summarize that, if Marcel is the starter, you think it's his game?
I think so. But again, knowing Coach Elko, he's going to go with feel. And, the good thing is this team, they don't just say it. They believe they can win without a quarterback.
That's awesome. That's a big statement. That's really cool.
It's pretty wild. Yeah. Sometimes when you have two, you don't have one, but it sounds like A&M's going to play both on Saturday night, and they're very comfortable doing that.
Well, think about this, guys. I don't agree with two quarterbacks either, but the two quarterbacks have won them a couple of games, right? Because Missouri did not expect Connor, and Connor torched them. LSU did not expect Marcel, and Marcel torched them. And then I'll say this too. Marcel Reed came in through a very difficult stretch of the season when Connor Wigman went down, where this team has had injuries before in years past, and their numbers go down. What do? They went on the road in Florida and won their first road game in 3 years. What do they do after that? They won against Arkansas and Gerald, a game that was tied entering the fourth quarter. What do? They won against a Bowling Green team that was try hard. They just kept on, chipping away, and had a chance in the last game. Marcel Reed has proven through his high school career and his short college career, which includes coming in the bowl game, the Texas Bowl last year, after the first play of the game when Jalen Henderson went down. At fourth quarterback, threw for 350 yards in a loss, but came in there unexpected play as a freshman and dazzled. Guy's just got a winning DNA, and I don't think you have to give that an opportunity to shine.
Yeah,
100% agree. Well, I tell you what, man, I really do think this is probably, I think a lot of us agree, it's probably a lower scoring game, and it's a line of scrimmage game. Gamecocks offensive line this year just hadn't been that good, and they're last in the nation in sacks allowed. That is a scary proposition against this A&M defense. And then the flip side. So the defensive lines are going to make a big impact on this game. I think we all know that. Are you making the trip to Columbia?
I am. I'm leaving tomorrow. Hey, and I want to make a point about that you just said. It's funny, as a talk show host, what we remember is what we get wrong, right? Like, that's what I remember. Not the stuff I get right, although I can spit off some things I've gotten right. I remember in my head thinking the Notre Dame game. Notre Dame's got like third stringers on the offensive line. They're coming to Kyle Field. They're going to get destroyed. That offensive line was fantastic against A&M. Like, we couldn't get to Riley Leonard. So it's interesting in this chess piece kind of football game that a coach knows what works for a team, and they will make the necessary changes. In that game, Riley Leonard threw the ball so quick, they didn't have a time to get to him, right? And potentially, Shane Beamer's thinking the exact same thing. If Lenore Sellers is going to throw, he better be able to connect on the short to intermediate pass.
Yeah, there's no doubt. They got to get the ball out of his hand. They're going to have to they're going to have to roll him out and reset the pocket, and they've got to go to the quick game and get the ball out to try to loosen some things up. I think it's going to be a great game. I think a lot of us are expecting it to be a great game, and Sean McDonough is going to call it, so it probably will be on Saturday night. Hey, David, you are welcome back anytime, man. It's a pleasure to have you on. TexAgs.com is a fantastic website. Y'all do as good as anybody in the country. We hope you enjoy Columbia. It's always, I think I'll say this because I've seen every fan base in Columbia, South Carolina. The Aggies fan base is always welcome. They're always, it's a great group of people. Obviously, you're in the media, so it's a little bit different, but the media and the fans and when they make their way to Columbia, I know some folks take exception to the midnight yell on the State House steps on Friday nights before. So maybe down the road, we might need to look at adjusting that. But outside of that, as far as welcoming a group to town, it's always neat to see them come. Much more so than, like Georgia, Tennessee. Like, nobody wants all that crap around. You know what I mean?
Hey, just wait till we start winning, if we ever start winning. When we start winning at a high level, because we're going to be just like that. Because I'm going to tell you, as a longtime Houston sports fan, I'm an Astros guy, and not that baseball is my first love, but and for years, the Astros are now one of the most hated fan bases out there for the cheating scandal, and also because how good the team has been over the last 10 years. If A&M figures it out, and it feels like we're going to be in that same breath. But until then, I hope to see you guys.
It's like I always say, David. Nobody hates Vanderbilt. No one ever hates Vandy.
Yeah, nobody hates South Carolina generally either.
You generally hate.
Maybe Alabama hates Vandy.
Well, Alabama
Yeah.
hates them now, yeah. But in general, they're pretty like, Vandy fans. We like those guys. We love
Nice
Nashville.
Well, I was in the ballpark in 2010 when Kenny Trill came in and threw all over the yard, and
Gosh.
that was
What's he doing now? Is he running a taco stand in the College Station? What's going on?
I haven't seen Kenny. He transferred to TCU his last couple of years, so I don't know what he's doing right now.
Yeah, I don't know, but I remember everything about that day. Thinking,
Absolutely.
oh, we're in the top 10. The Aggies are in town. They don't know anything about the SEC and being this and that and the other.
But by
Yeah,
the
they
way,
knew a little
David,
bit.
it's not too late to poach Mark Stoops again if you want to give that another shot over there.
Hey, I didn't tweet this because I didn't want to make myself an embarrassment, but when Texas started throwing bottles on the field against Georgia, I was thinking to myself, man, this happened on the TexAgs message board when they thought Mark Stoops was going to be the coach. They basically did the exact same thing.
Yeah, right.
They just typed it.
That's right.
That would have been something. That would have been something and that was very close to happening. If you talk to people in the inside, they'll tell you like that was not just internet rumors.
It was close.
Well, I think and on that note, we'll let you run, man. But I think that there's a ton of people out there that think, and probably I would say rightfully so, that this is the most difficult challenge that's left to set up what would be the showdown of showdowns with the Longhorns at the end of the season. If you get through this one, feel pretty good, like they could win the next couple. I know they got the trip to Auburn, but then here come the Longhorns. So we'll see. But have a safe trip, man. Welcome to Columbia. Welcome to town. And hopefully it's a spectacular game on Saturday night. Thank you so much for your time.
I hope to see you guys this weekend. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thanks,
Thank you, David.
Appreciate it.
David Nuno, TexAgs.